The Tunstead quarry, owned by ICI, is the largest limestone quarry in the world outside America, with a working face 1¼ miles in length and producing around 4 million tonnes of stone every year, much of it transported by rail. It means big business for BR, as we discussed with resource and contract manager Mike Gorton.
In total, we generally run about 15 block trains a day from this area, from Peak Forest and the quarries around here. The quarries, the main ones are the RMC quarry at Dove Holes, just behind us, and the Tunstead quarry in the distance. And we operate with pairs of Class 37 locos, which haul trains between 500 tonnes payload and up to a maximum of 1,500 tonnes. Because the gradients are very severe, 1 in 75, we have to have banker engines which bank up to Peak Forest to the yard here. And so this is the focal point for the activity. And we are working trains to the home counties, East Anglia, Manchester, Liverpool, and it's really supplying, it's a conveyor belt system supplying from the quarry to the customer's railhead, so that he can then distribute by road to the road construction industry and the building trade and the like. There's only Sunday when we don't have any major activity, but we start up at 1 o'clock on Monday morning and really go through until late evening on Saturday. I would estimate, for instance, at the moment we're doing something like 3.5 million tonnes of business on rail out of this area. I would estimate within the next 5 years we could well double that tonnage on rail.
That's a great deal of stone to carry. How's it going to be moved, and who's going to invest in the hundreds of costly new wagons which will be required? British Rail or the customer?
Most in the rail freight side of construction, most of the wagons are privately owned wagons, so we don't invest in those actually. It's our customers or wagon leasing companies who provide those. So rather than the standard flat-bottomed wagon, which maybe takes 33 tonnes payload, or the hopper wagon, which takes 37 tonnes payload, we're now getting more and more wagons which are taking 60 tonnes, 70 tonnes payload, and not necessarily a standard design. Some of them have conveyor belts, self-discharge trains, which have conveyor belts down the centre of the train to allow goods to be, the aggregates to be discharged. Others are side tip wagons, which just tip to the side. And so there's a mass of different designs coming on nowadays, all designed to try and get the customer to put his traffic on rail and provide facilities at a lower cost. Obviously, if he's got to invest millions in a railhead, the more we can reduce his costs, and through the help of the wagon industry we're doing that, the more we hope to attract business off roads onto rail.
Private investment by the customers means that many of the wagons are very modern, but the same can't be said just yet of BR's infrastructure and operating methods, some of which haven't changed a great deal since the days of steam traction. In the yard at Tunstead, a Class 47 awaits departure to the ICI plant at Oakley. This train runs 3 times daily on 363 days each year. There are no services on Christmas Day and Boxing Day, but restricted storage capacity at Oakley means that extra trains have to run before and after the break to compensate for the 2 days lost deliveries each year. Stone for the ICI factory at Oakley is used as part of the chemical process. The surplus stone is sold for road building. The taxing 1 in 75 climb from Tunstead to Peak Forest requires the use of a banking locomotive. Typically, the trains are hauled by a Class 47 and assisted by a Class 37. Incidentally, although many of the wagons are very modern, these high-capacity bogie hoppers actually date from the 1930s and have thus been in continuous use here for more than half a century. The Tunstead trains are normally worked by a single locomotive from Peak Forest, where the traffic from the neighbouring Dove Holes quarry is also dispatched. This is almost exclusively roadstone. Regular destinations are Washwood Heath, Bletchley, Ely, Leeds and Selby. Class 20s working in pairs also play an important part in keeping peak stone traffic moving. And note once again the 1930s vintage hopper wagons. They've certainly given good value for money. Despite the intensive traffic, much of the BR infrastructure is of traditional pattern, including manual signal boxes with Victorian lever frames and semaphore signalling. It's a tribute to the durability and flexibility of this equipment, designed so many years ago, that it continues to provide a safe framework in which the stone trains can run. The signalman still logs each train movement by hand and watches from his windows as the banker potters about, shunting local trip wagons, which might include diesel oil for the Motive Power Depot at Buxton or empty lime hoppers for Hindlow. Between Great Rocks Junction and Buxton is single track, and as most locomotives visiting Tunstead and Peak Forest need to visit the depot at Buxton, a great deal of light engine running is required. Sometimes up to 5 locomotives may be coupled together to make the best use of line capacity. Shortly after lunch each working day, a massive train of 38 wagons, known simply to the railwaymen as the Big Train, leaves Peak Forest, hauled by a pair of Class 37s and bound for Hope Street, Salford. Traffic is getting heavier, the wagons more modern. When is the rest of the railway going to catch up on new technology?
We are looking, traction-wise, to introduce the Class 60s, which have just come on stream, and we're looking to introduce those within the next couple of years into the Peak District. Infrastructure-wise, track and signalling, we are talking at the moment with our engineering colleagues about how we can improve track layouts, how we can cater for bigger trains, trains of extra length, rather than handling it on the existing track, which is a lot of it the Victorian era layout. So it's a general investment programme that we're looking at, but first and foremost it's the locomotives that we're feeding in.
One result of sectorisation is that successful operations like this can more easily highlight their profits and thus make a strongly justified call on funds for investment. The days of double heading, banking and semaphore signalling are probably numbered in the Peak District. See them while you can. The Peak stone trains can be seen at various locations in and around Manchester, such as here at Navigation Road.